I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The chill of early March crept through the small crack in my living room window, the one I'd been meaning to seal for months. My old cardigan, worn thin at the elbows but still my favorite, barely kept the cold at bay as I flipped through the morning paper. Nothing interesting, just the usual: rising prices, local politics, and another development breaking ground in what used to be farmland when I first moved here 30 years ago. My name is Nancy Jones, and at 68, I've learned to find comfort in simple routines. Coffee at 7 a.m., crossword puzzle by 8, a phone call with my friend Sarah by 9, though lately she'd been calling earlier as if checking I was still breathing. The house was quiet. Too quiet, some might say. But after decades of rushing to work, rushing to school events, rushing to make ends meet, the silence felt earned. My small 2-bedroom home wasn't much by today's standards. The kitchen cabinets needed updating, the bathroom faucet dripped no matter how many washers I replaced, but it was mine. Every mortgage payment hard-won, every creaky floorboard a testament to a life lived thoroughly. The framed photographs that lined my hallway told the story better than I could. Snapshots of a life centered around one person. My son, Ryan. There he was at 5, gap-toothed and beaming on his first day of kindergarten. At 12, clutching a science fair trophy. At 18, in his graduation cap and gown, arms slung around my shoulders. I was smiling in that photo, though I remember being exhausted. I'd worked double shifts at Morrison Office Services for 3 months to pay for his senior trip. My late husband James smiled from only one photo, our wedding day. He'd been gone 26 years now, heart attack at 42. Too young, everyone said. I was left with a 10-year-old son, a mountain of medical bills, and no choice but to become both mother and father, provider and nurturer. The phone rang, startling me from my memories. "You're up early," I said, knowing it would be Sarah. "Just checking on my favorite troublemaker," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the same warmth it had when we'd met at Morrison's decades ago. Sarah Miller had been my rock since James died. She understood loss, having lost her husband to cancer 5 years after I became a widow. She had one daughter who lived in California and called dutifully on holidays. "Any word from His Royal Highness?" Sarah asked. She never referred to Ryan by name anymore, not since his engagement to Olivia White 2 months ago. "Not since last week," I admitted, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. "He's busy with wedding plans, I'm sure." Sarah hummed, her disapproval clear even through the phone line. Too busy to call his mother? The woman who skipped meals to make sure he could go to soccer camp? "Sarah," I warned gently. I know. He's your son and you love him." She sighed. "I just remember when that boy would call you every Sunday like clockwork. That was before Olivia, before Ryan had been absorbed into the pristine world of the Whites, a family with old money, older connections, and a townhouse in the most exclusive part of the city. Harold White owned a string of successful investment firms, and his wife Eleanor moved through social circles I couldn't even name. Their daughter Olivia had Ryan mesmerized from their first date 2 years ago. "They're sending out wedding invitations soon," I said, changing the subject. "Ryan mentioned I should watch for mine in the mail." "Watch for it? Shouldn't the mother of the groom be involved in addressing them?" Sarah's voice rose with indignation. "It's different these days," I said, the excuse sounding weak even to my ears. "Olivia has a very specific vision for the wedding." The truth was, I'd been systematically excluded from every wedding decision. My suggestions for the rehearsal dinner were politely ignored. My offer to help with centerpieces, I'd arranged flowers at the local church for 15 years, was declined with a tight smile from Eleanor White, who informed me they'd hired a professional with experience in elevated aesthetics. "Have you bought your dress yet?" Sarah asked. I glanced toward my bedroom where the credit card statement lay open on my dresser. I'd splurged on a simple navy dress that cost more than I typically spent on clothes in 6 months. It was classic, dignified, and I hoped wouldn't embarrass Ryan among Olivia's designer-clad relatives. Yes, it's lovely. Simple but nice, I said. I want to see it. Lunch tomorrow? We made plans to meet, and after hanging up, I moved to the kitchen to wash my breakfast dishes. Through the window above the sink, I could see my small backyard. The rose bushes I'd planted 15 years ago would bloom soon, their buds already forming. I'd tended those roses through drought, disease, and harsh winters. They always came back, stronger each year. My phone chimed with a text. Ryan. My heart leapt with that automatic response mothers never outgrow, no matter how old their children become. Hi, Mom. Need to talk about the wedding. Call when you can. I dried my hands and called immediately. Hey, Mom. Ryan's voice carried that slightly distant quality it had adopted in the past year, as if he was speaking to me while simultaneously checking his email. Ryan, sweetheart. How are you? How's Olivia? I settled into my armchair, prepared to savor this rare contact. Fine. Listen, I'm calling about the wedding. A pause. We're finalizing some details. Oh? Do you need help with anything? I tried to keep the eagerness from my voice. Actually, another pause, longer this time. I need to talk to you about the ceremony and reception. Something in his tone made me sit straighter. What about it, honey? Olivia and I have been discussing the aesthetic we're going for. The word aesthetic sounded foreign in my son's mouth, a borrowed concept. It's going to be very elegant, very curated. I'm sure it will be beautiful, I said, smiling even though he couldn't see me. The country club is a lovely venue. Right. So here's the thing, Mom. His voice dropped slightly. Olivia's family is very image conscious. Her father is paying for everything, and they want the photos to be perfect. My fingers tightened around the phone. I understand, Ryan. I won't wear anything flashy. That's just it, Mom. He cut me off, and I could practically hear him wincing. Rebecca and I have been talking, and we think you might not fit the aesthetic. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. What do you mean, Ryan? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Another silence, then words that landed like physical blows. You're not photogenic anymore, Mom. You've aged a lot these past few years, and Olivia's family is very image conscious. They want the photos to be perfect. The room seemed to tilt around me. Surely I'd misheard. Ryan, I'm your mother. I know, and I love you for everything you've done, he said quickly, but this is about starting my new life with Olivia. You don't want me at your wedding because I'm too old? The words felt impossible coming from my mouth. Don't be dramatic, Mom. It's not like that. But his tone confirmed it was exactly like that. We think it might be better if you watched the ceremony via live stream. Olivia's cousin is a videographer. She'll set up a private link. My free hand pressed against my chest, feeling my heart beat through the thin cardigan. You're uninviting me from your wedding? Mom, please understand. This is Rebecca's dream wedding. Everything has to be perfect. And I'm not perfect. The statement hung between us, not a question. Ryan's sigh crackled through the phone. There's something else we should discuss while we're talking. Something worse than being banned from my only child's wedding? I couldn't imagine. Olivia and I think it might be time to consider some long-term care options for you. Long-term care? I repeated, confused. Ryan, I'm perfectly healthy. My last checkup. We've looked into Sunset Manor, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. It's a really nice facility, very modern. They have social activities, proper meals, medical supervision. We've already inquired about an opening next month. A nursing home. My son and his fiancée wanted to put me in a nursing home at 68 with nothing wrong with me but gray hair and laugh lines. Hands that showed the honest work they'd done. I don't need a nursing home, Ryan. My voice had regained its strength, fueled by disbelief. Mom, you've been isolated since you retired. It's not healthy. At Sunset Manor, you'd have companions your own age. I have friends. I have Sarah. I volunteer at the church. Rebecca and I are starting a family soon, he interrupted, and we won't have time to keep checking on you. This is what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone? As if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person who had devoted decades of her life to ensuring he became the man he was today. Next month, I said flatly. You've inquired about next month. They have an opening. It's actually quite difficult to get into Sunset Manor. Their waiting list is usually... I hung up without saying goodbye. The phone immediately rang again. I silenced it and placed its screen down on the side table. Outside, the afternoon sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting warm patches on the tile floor. The same sun that had shone yesterday and would shine tomorrow, indifferent to the fact that my world had just shattered. For several minutes, I sat perfectly still, feeling the weight of each breath. Then, like a tide rolling in, the hurt crashed over me. Not just hurt, rage. A hot, unfamiliar anger that burned away the shock and left clarity in its wake. I reached for my phone and called Sarah. He doesn't want me at the wedding, I said when she answered, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm too old and not photogenic enough for Olivia's family photos. Sarah's shocked gasp was followed by a string of colorful language that would have scandalized our former coworkers at Morrison's. I'm coming over, she declared. Don't move. There's more, I said. They want to put me in a nursing home next month. The silence on Sarah's end was more eloquent than any curse word. I'll be there in 15 minutes, she said finally. And Nancy, don't you dare start thinking they're right. After hanging up, I walked to my bedroom and stood before the full-length mirror on my closet door. Gray hair cut in a simple bob that I maintained myself with careful trimming every 6 weeks. Lines around my eyes and mouth. Laugh lines, my mother had called them. A body that had softened with age but remained healthy and capable. Hands that showed years of work. Raising a child, typing reports, gardening, crafting. Was this what Ryan saw? An embarrassment? A liability? When had I transformed in his eyes from mother to burden? Sarah arrived with a bottle of wine and a fury that radiated from her like heat. I'll kill him, she announced as she strode through my front door. I'll kill him and that plastic Barbie doll he's marrying. Despite everything, I smiled. Sarah at 70 was a force of nature. Silver hair cropped short. Eyes bright with indignation behind red-framed glasses. She'd retired from Morrison's 5 years ago, the same time as me, but unlike me, she'd embraced retirement with gusto, traveling, taking art classes, even briefly dating a man she met in her community garden, until, as she put it, he revealed himself to be a Republican. You won't kill anyone, I said, accepting the wine and leading her to the kitchen for glasses. He's still my son. Is he? Sarah challenged, following me. Because the Ryan I knew would never treat his mother this way. That boy used to brag about you to anyone who would listen. I poured us each a glass of wine and sat at my small kitchen table, tracing the familiar pattern of the wood grain with my fingertip. It's her, I said quietly. Olivia, she's... changed him, Sarah snorted. Give me a break. Ryan is a 34-year-old man, not a teenager being peer pressured into smoking behind the gym. He's making choices. The truth of her words stung, but I couldn't deny them. Ryan was an adult making conscious decisions. Somewhere along the way, he'd decided I was dispensable. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked, gentler now. I took a slow sip of wine, buying time. "I don't know yet." "Tell me you're not considering that nursing home nonsense." "Of course not," I said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." Sarah nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now about this wedding. Are you going to fight back? Demand to be included?" I considered this, imagining myself calling Ryan, pleading for a place at his wedding. The humiliation of begging to be recognized by my own son was too much to bear. "No," I decided. "If he doesn't want me there, I won't force myself on him." Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but instead she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "This isn't about you being old or unphotogenic," she said. "This is about them being shallow, image-obsessed snobs who can't see past their own reflections." I squeezed back, grateful for her fierce loyalty. "Thank you, Sarah." We finished our wine as the afternoon light faded, talking about everything except Ryan and his wedding. As Sarah prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Nancy, don't let them make you feel small. You are worth more than they could possibly imagine." Her words echoed in my mind long after she'd gone, stirring something that felt almost like possibility. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, haunted by Ryan's voice saying I was no longer photogenic enough for his perfect day. Around 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and padded to the kitchen for a glass of water. Moonlight filtered through the window, casting silver patches on the tile floor. I'd scrubbed those tiles on hands and knees last week, just as I'd painted every wall in this house myself, refinished the hardwood floors in the living room, planted the garden that bloomed with roses and tomatoes each summer. This was my home, built not just with mortgage payments, but with years of careful maintenance and love. The thought of being forced from it into some sterile facility made my chest tighten with both grief and determination. I found myself walking to my bedroom and pulling open the bottom drawer of my old dresser. Beneath a stack of sweaters I'd knitted but rarely wore lay a collection of manila folders I hadn't looked at in months. Bank statements, property deeds, investment portfolios. Ryan thought he knew his mother. He thought I was just a lonely old woman whose greatest accomplishment was raising him. He had no idea what I'd been quietly building all these years, preparing for the day when I'd no longer be able to work, when I'd need security in my old age. I spread the documents across my bed like puzzle pieces that had taken me decades to assemble. Most people saw what Ryan saw: a tired woman in modest clothes, living in a small house in an unfashionable neighborhood. What they didn't see was the method behind what looked like mere frugality. The first property deed was for a small duplex I'd purchased 15 years ago, just after Ryan started college. The seller had been desperate: a divorce, need for quick cash, and I'd offered a fair but immediate deal. I'd used money from selling my mother's engagement ring and a small inheritance she'd left me. Money I'd never told Ryan about because I knew he'd have ideas for spending it. The duplex was in what real estate agents called a transitional neighborhood, which was code for poor now, but probably not forever. I'd rented both units, using the income to cover the mortgage and maintenance while living off my office manager wages. The second folder contained documents for a small commercial building I'd bought 8 years later. The previous owner had been an elderly man whose children lived out of state and wanted nothing to do with managing rental property. Again, I'd approached with a cash offer below market value, but with a quick closing. 3 small businesses rented space there: a tax preparation service, a nail salon, and a sandwich shop. Nothing glamorous, but all reliable tenants whose rent payments went straight into my savings after covering the mortgage. The third property had been my boldest move: a 4-unit apartment building in what used to be called the wrong side of town, until young professionals discovered they could afford twice the space for half the price. I'd purchased it 3 years ago, just before the neighborhood really started gaining popularity. The mortgage was higher, but so was the rental income, and the building was now worth nearly double what I'd paid. All told, my real estate portfolio was worth just over $1.2 million. But that wasn't all. I'd been investing in index funds for 20 years, putting away every spare dollar after my frugal living expenses were covered. Nothing fancy or risky, just steady, boring investments that grew year after year while I continued to live like a woman with nothing. That portfolio was now worth another $800,000. Then there were the life insurance policies. 3 of them, actually. The first was a modest policy I'd purchased when Ryan was young, just enough to ensure he'd have something if anything happened to me. As the years passed and my investments grew, I'd bought 2 larger policies, using part of my real estate income to pay the premiums. Total death benefit, $500,000. My checking account, the one Ryan probably assumed held my meager Social Security and pension, actually contained $127,000. My savings account held another $200,000. Altogether, I was worth just over $2.6 million. I'd built this fortune not out of greed, but out of fear. Fear of being dependent. Fear of being a burden. Fear of ending up in some state-run facility if I couldn't care for myself. Ironically, the very independence I'd worked so hard to secure was exactly what my son now wanted to take from me. The money had been my secret, my security blanket, my insurance against an uncertain future. I'd planned to tell Ryan about it eventually, maybe when I turned 70 or when I actually needed help. I'd imagined his surprise, his pride that his mother had been more capable than he'd realized. I'd imagined him understanding that all those years of second-hand clothes and generic groceries hadn't been about deprivation, but about building something lasting. Now, sitting on my bed with 20 years of careful planning spread before me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Power. Ryan wanted me out of his life because I was an embarrassment. Olivia wanted me in a nursing home because I was an inconvenience. Neither of them had any idea that the shabby old woman they were trying to discard had more money than they'd likely ever see. I picked up the will I'd drafted 5 years earlier. It was simple and straightforward. I leave my entire estate to my beloved son, Ryan Jones, knowing he will use it wisely to build the life I always dreamed he would have. How naive that seemed now. How foolishly sentimental. I reached for my phone and checked the time. 3:17 a.m. Too early to call anyone, but not too early to make decisions. I opened my laptop and searched for William Davis, attorney. I'd met with him 5 years ago when drafting my will, and had found him to be thorough and discreet. His office opened at 9 a.m. I would be his first appointment. As dawn broke over my small backyard, illuminating the budding rose bushes, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, a strange calm settling over me. For the first time in decades, perhaps for the first time in my life, I was about to make a decision that centered entirely on what I wanted, not what my son needed. The freedom in that realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. I'd been a mother for so long that I wasn't sure I remembered how to be anything else. But as I looked toward the documents stacked neatly on my dining table, proof of the woman I'd been quietly becoming while playing the role of devoted mother, I realized I was about to find out. At 8:30, I called Sarah. "I need to tell you something," I said when she answered, my voice steadier than it had been in years. "You're not considering that nursing home nonsense, are you?" she demanded immediately. "No," I assured her, "but I am making some changes." I paused. "Sarah, there's something I've never told anyone, not even you. I'm worth $2.6 million. The silence that followed was so complete, I thought the call might have dropped. "Sarah, are you there?" "Nancy Jones," she said finally, her voice tight with emotion. "You better start explaining right now." I did. outlining my properties, investments, and insurance policies while Sarah listened in stunned silence. "All this time," she said when I finished, "all those years you brought bologna sandwiches to work while I splurged on takeout, you were secretly building an empire." I laughed at her characterization. "Hardly an empire, just security." "And Ryan has no idea?" "None. He thinks I'm surviving on Social Security and a modest pension." "Oh, this is delicious," Sarah said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "What are you going to do?" "I have an appointment with my attorney at 9. I'm changing my will." "Good," Sarah said firmly. "That ungrateful boy doesn't deserve your money." "It's not just about the money," I said, surprising myself with the certainty I felt. "It's about recognizing who he's become, and who I've been becoming all along." "Who are you leaving it to instead?" I'd been thinking about this all night. "The Women's Educational Foundation." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "The one that helps women go back to school after divorce or widowhood?" "Yes. I've been donating small amounts to them for years. They provide scholarships and job training for women trying to rebuild their lives after losing partners or escaping bad situations. Women who need a second chance." "Women like you might have been," Sarah observed quietly, "if you hadn't been so determined to do it on your own." "Exactly." "I'm proud of you, Nancy," she said, her voice thick. "So what happens next?" I glanced at the clock, 8:45. "I meet with William Davis and change my will. And then?" "And then?" I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "And then I decide what Nancy Jones wants from the rest of her life." William Davis's office smelled like leather and old books, which seemed appropriate given what I was about to do. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I'd chosen him 5 years ago when I first had my will drafted because he came recommended as discreet and thorough. "Mrs. Jones," he said, settling behind his mahogany desk, "when you called to schedule this appointment, you mentioned wanting to make substantial changes to your will. Before we begin, I want to make sure this is something you've thought through carefully. Estate planning decisions made in emotional states often lead to regret." I appreciated his caution. William Davis hadn't built his reputation by letting clients make rash decisions they'd later want to reverse. "Mr. Davis, I'm 68 years old. I've had one night to think about this, but honestly, I've been thinking about it for much longer than that." I straightened in my chair. "My circumstances have changed, and my will needs to reflect reality, not wishful thinking." He opened my file and reviewed the existing will, the one that left everything to Ryan. "This is a substantial estate," he observed. "When we drafted this, you mentioned you'd built it with your son's future in mind." "That was before I learned what my son actually thinks of me." I told him about Ryan's call, about being too unattractive for the wedding, about the nursing home. William Davis was a professional who'd probably heard every family dysfunction imaginable, but I saw something flicker across his face. Disgust, maybe, or recognition of a story he'd heard too many times. "I see," he said quietly when I'd finished. "And you want to remove your son as beneficiary entirely?" "Completely. I want to redirect my entire estate to the Women's Educational Foundation." He made a note on a legal pad. "That's a significant charitable bequest. The foundation will be quite surprised. I hope they'll put it to good use. There are a lot of women out there who need a second chance, who need to know they can build something for themselves, even when everyone around them says they're not worth investing in." "And you're certain about this?" "Once we execute new documents, your previous will become invalid. If something were to happen to you, your son would inherit nothing." I met his gaze steadily. "Nothing is exactly what he's earned." We spent the next 2 hours going through every detail. I wanted the will to be ironclad, with no possibility for Ryan to contest it successfully. William suggested additional documentation, a video recording of me explaining my reasoning, letters to be opened after my death that would make my intentions clear. He wanted to be absolutely certain that when the time came, there would be no doubt about my mental capacity or decision-making ability. "There is one more thing," I said as we were finishing up. "I want to include a letter to my son, something to be delivered with the will." "What kind of letter?" I'd been thinking about this since the night Ryan called. "I want him to understand what he's lost, not just the money. I want him to know who I really was, what I accomplished, what I sacrificed. I want him to know that the woman he considered too ugly to acknowledge was worth more than he ever imagined." William Davis nodded. "We can arrange for that. I'll have my assistant prepare the documents for your signature next week, and we can record your video statement at that time." As I was gathering my purse to leave, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Jones, if you don't mind my asking, and feel free not to answer, what are your plans now? You're making this change to your will, but you're still a relatively young woman with many years ahead of you." It was a good question, one I'd been asking myself since dawn. What did you do with the rest of your life when you'd spent so many years living it for someone else? "I'm not sure," I said honestly. "For the first time in my adult life, I get to find out." Sarah was waiting for me at a cafe down the street from the law office. She'd offered to come with me for moral support, but I'd wanted to handle this part alone. Now I was glad to see her familiar face. "How do you feel?" she asked as I slid into the booth across from her. "Free," I said, and was surprised to realize it was true. "Scared, but free." "Good. You should be scared. You're about to find out who Nancy Jones is when she's not busy being Ryan Jones's mother." I stirred sugar into my coffee. "What if I don't like who that is?" Sarah smiled. "Honey, you've been hiding her under a bushel for 34 years. I have a feeling she's going to surprise you." As we sat drinking coffee, I found myself thinking about practical next steps. I didn't want to stay in the same town, in the same house where I'd spent so many years waiting for Ryan to visit or call. I didn't want to keep living the small life I'd built around his needs. "Sarah," I said suddenly, "how do you feel about traveling?" Her eyebrows rose. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we took a trip? A real trip, not just a weekend somewhere. What if we went to Europe or Australia or somewhere we've always talked about but never gone?" Sarah's eyes lit up. "Nancy Jones, are you suggesting we become jet-setting ladies of leisure?" "Why not? I've got more money than I knew what to do with when I was planning to leave it to Ryan. If I'm going to spend it on something worthwhile, why shouldn't that something be living the life I never let myself have?" For the first time since Ryan's phone call, I felt something that wasn't anger or hurt or determination. I felt excitement. The future, which had looked so bleak and limited just days ago, suddenly seemed wide open with possibility. But first, there was one more thing I needed to do. One last gift I wanted to give my son. "I'm going to the wedding," I announced. Sarah's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Excuse me? The wedding you've been explicitly uninvited from?" "Yes," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "I want to sit in that church, in the back row where his bride's aesthetic won't be disturbed, and watch him smile his biggest smile. I want to see him believe that he successfully discarded the inconvenient parts of his old life." Sarah was watching me closely. "And then?" I met her gaze. "And then I want to hand him an envelope that will teach him the difference between what you think you're throwing away and what you've actually lost." "Nancy," Sarah said slowly, "I have never been more proud to be your friend." The wedding was still 3 weeks away. That gave me time to plan my final performance as Ryan Jones's mother. The sleek high-rise apartment building where Ryan and Olivia lived gleamed in the afternoon sun, all glass and steel and exclusivity. From the 23rd floor, the city spread out like a toy model, cars reduced to colorful dots moving along gray ribbons of road. Inside their penthouse apartment, Ryan Jones paced across Italian marble floors, his reflection fragmented in the floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd loosened his tie, a gesture of discomfort more than relaxation. "I just don't understand why you're so upset," Olivia said, perched on the edge of their designer sofa. It was a perfectly reasonable conversation. Ryan ran a hand through his carefully styled dark hair. "I told my mother she couldn't come to our wedding, Liv." "My mother." Olivia White sighed, the sound practiced and delicate like everything else about her. At 32, she'd perfected the art of appearing both innocent and authoritative, a talent she'd honed growing up as the only daughter of Harold and Eleanor White. "You explained the aesthetic concerns," she said, examining her manicured nails. "You offered the live stream option. You even discussed Sunset Manor, which would be a huge upgrade from that house she insists on staying in." "She hung up on me," Ryan said, stopping his pacing to look at his fiancée. "She's never hung up on me before." Olivia rose gracefully, her silk blouse rustling as she moved to pour herself a glass of white wine from the open bottle on their marble-topped bar. "She'll get over it," she said, not offering Ryan a glass. "Parents always do. They have no choice." Ryan watched her, a flicker of something, doubt perhaps, crossing his features. "Your parents wouldn't miss our wedding for anything." "My parents understand the importance of presentation," Olivia replied, "just like they understood when I explained why we couldn't seat your mother at the family table. It would throw off all the photos." Ryan's jaw tightened. "That's different. They're still coming." "Because they fit the aesthetic," Olivia said simply, as if explaining a basic concept to a child. "Your mother doesn't. Not anymore." Ryan turned away from her, looking out at the city below. Somewhere out there, in a modest neighborhood he rarely visited anymore, his mother was probably sitting in her worn armchair, hurt and confused. The thought made his stomach twist uncomfortably. "Maybe we should reconsider," he said quietly. "Maybe we could seat her somewhere less visible, or—" "Ryan!" Olivia's tone sharpened. "We've been over this. My father is paying for this entire wedding. The guest list has been carefully curated. The seating arrangements are designed for optimal photographs." She took a deliberate sip of wine. "Besides, you yourself said she's been slipping lately. Forgetting things, living in that unsafe neighborhood." "She doesn't forget things," Ryan corrected automatically. "And she's lived in that house for 30 years without incident." Olivia set down her wineglass with a soft clink. "This isn't just about the wedding, Ryan. It's about what comes next. We're starting a family soon. We can't be responsible for checking on your mother every week. Sunset Manor is the perfect solution." Ryan turned back to face her, his expression troubled. "She's only 68, Olivia. She's healthy, independent." "For now," Olivia countered. "But what about in 5 years? 10? Better to get her settled somewhere while she's still able to adjust." She moved toward him, sliding her arms around his waist, her voice softening. "I'm thinking of both of you. You won't have the guilt of neglecting her, and she'll have proper care. It's the responsible choice." Ryan looked down at Olivia, beautiful, poised Olivia, who had walked into his life 2 years ago at a charity gala and shown him a world he'd only glimpsed from the outside. Before Olivia, he'd been just another mid-level executive at Harold White's investment firm, talented but not exceptional. After Olivia, doors began to open. Promotions came faster, invitations to exclusive events arrived, connections with powerful people materialized. It wasn't that Olivia had explicitly promised these things in exchange for his devotion. She didn't need to. The correlation was obvious. His life improved in direct proportion to how thoroughly he embraced her world and its values. And if embracing that world meant creating distance from his old one, well, wasn't that the natural order of things? Wasn't that what success looked like? "You're right," he said finally, forcing conviction into his voice. "It's for the best. For everyone." Olivia smiled and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Of course it is. Now we need to finalize the menu selections for the rehearsal dinner. I'm thinking the seared scallops for the first course, then—" As she continued detailing their wedding plans, Ryan's thoughts drifted to his mother, to the way she'd sounded on the phone, her voice growing smaller with each word he spoke. For a moment he remembered being 10 years old, the year his father died, watching his mother sit at their kitchen table long after she thought he'd gone to bed, silently writing out bills by the dim light over the stove, shoulders curved with exhaustion, but refusing to bend completely. He pushed the memory away. That was the past. This, the penthouse, Olivia, the white family connections, this was his future. And futures, by necessity, required leaving some things behind. Across town, in a lavish colonial-style home set back from the road behind wrought iron gates, Harold and Eleanor White sat in their formal dining room, crystal glasses of bourbon in hand. "I'm concerned about this wedding," Harold said, swirling the amber liquid thoughtfully. At 65, he maintained the physique of the college athlete he'd once been, his silver hair adding distinction rather than age to his appearance. "Why? Everything is proceeding exactly as planned," Eleanor replied. At 63, she looked a decade younger, thanks to disciplined diet, exercise, and the discreet work of the city's most exclusive plastic surgeon. "The mother," Harold said simply. "Olivia says they've uninvited her." Eleanor raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "On aesthetic grounds, apparently. I've seen photos. She's ordinary. Nothing that couldn't be managed with proper styling and seating arrangements." "It's extreme," Harold noted. "Excluding the mother of the groom entirely." "Since when do you concern yourself with sentimentality?" Eleanor asked, a note of amusement in her voice. "You've excluded people from business deals for less." Harold sipped his bourbon. "Business is business. Family is different." "Is it?" Eleanor challenged. "We've spent Olivia's entire life teaching her the importance of strategic connections. Ryan Jones is a strategic connection. Bright enough to be useful in the firm, malleable enough to be shaped, attractive enough to produce acceptable grandchildren. His mother serves no purpose in this equation." Harold studied his wife, admiring her ruthless clarity while simultaneously wondering, not for the first time, if their shared values had calcified into something harder and less flexible than he'd intended. If word gets out that we excluded a 68-year-old widow from her only son's wedding, it could reflect poorly on the firm. People talk. Eleanor waved this concern away. "The official story is that she's ill and unable to attend. A private live stream will be arranged out of consideration for her condition. No one will question it." "And the nursing home angle?" "A generous gift from concerned family members, ensuring the best care for an aging relative." Eleanor finished her bourbon. "Really, Harold, this isn't complicated. Olivia is handling everything perfectly." Harold nodded, but a flicker of unease remained. Not because he particularly cared about Nancy Jones. He'd never met the woman, but because excluding her seemed unnecessary, even by their family's calculated standards. Still, he trusted his daughter's judgment. Olivia had never failed to navigate social waters with precision, and this wedding was simply another opportunity to demonstrate the White family's position and influence. If Nancy Jones needed to be removed from the equation for that to happen smoothly, so be it. "I suppose you're right," he conceded. as long as it doesn't become a distraction. It won't, Eleanor assured him. By this time next month, Ryan will be fully integrated into our family. The wedding photos will be perfect, and Nancy Jones will be settling into her new life at Sunset Manor, courtesy of our generosity. Everyone wins. Harold raised his glass in acknowledgement, silently hoping his wife's confidence was justified. Back in his apartment, Ryan stood on the balcony, phone in hand, staring at his mother's contact information. Her number was still saved under Mom, with a heart emoji, a remnant from years ago when he'd still called her every Sunday, when he'd still brought her flowers on Mother's Day, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His thumb hovered over the call button. Perhaps he should check on her. Explain again, more gently this time. Ryan, the wedding planner is on the line. She needs to know if we want the ivory linens or the eggshell, Olivia called from inside. He slipped the phone back into his pocket without making the call. The wedding was in 3 weeks. There would be time to smooth things over with his mother afterward. For now, there were more pressing concerns, like the difference between ivory and eggshell, which in Olivia's world was apparently significant enough to warrant immediate attention. Ryan took one last look at the city skyline, then turned and went back inside, closing the balcony door firmly behind him. I woke up on Ryan's wedding day feeling calmer than I had in months. For 3 weeks I'd been planning this moment, and now it was finally here. The morning sun streamed through my bedroom window, illuminating the dress I'd chosen for the occasion. Not the expensive navy dress I'd initially purchased. That one had been returned. Instead, a simple silver gray sheath dress with a matching jacket hung on my closet door. Elegant, understated, but of far better quality than anything I'd owned before. The kind of outfit that would photograph beautifully from a distance, but wouldn't draw undue attention. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah had asked yesterday as we finalized our plans over tea. "You could still change your mind. No one would blame you." "I'm sure," I'd replied, my resolve firm. "I need to see it with my own eyes. I need to know that I made this decision with all the facts, not just in the heat of emotion." Now, as I stood before the mirror applying a light layer of makeup, I marveled at how much had changed in just 3 weeks. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same person who'd received that devastating phone call from Ryan. That woman had been shocked, hurt, diminished. This woman, with her spine straight and her eyes clear, knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. I'd had my hair done the day before at a salon I'd never visited before. The stylist, a young woman named Carmen with bright red hair and genuine warmth in her eyes, had worked magic with my gray hair, giving it shape and shine I hadn't seen in years. "You look beautiful," she'd said when she finished. "Whatever this is for, you're going to be stunning." If only she knew. I'd also gone shopping. Really shopping. Not just picking up necessities at discount stores. I'd bought new shoes with modest heels, a sleek new purse, even new underwear. Because somehow starting over seemed to require being new from the inside out. The woman in my mirror looked like someone who belonged at a society wedding. Someone with dignity and presence. Too bad Ryan would never get the chance to introduce her to his new in-laws. The envelope sat on my dresser, sealed and waiting. Inside was a letter I'd written and rewritten a dozen times, along with William Davis's business card and a note to call him first thing Monday morning. By Tuesday, my son would know exactly what his cruelty had cost him. At precisely 9:00 a.m., I called a taxi. I'd briefly considered driving myself, but I wanted today to be different from every other day I'd spent as Ryan's mother. Today I was a guest, not just an obligation. Sarah had wanted to come with me for support, but I told her this was something I needed to do alone. "Just promise me you'll call as soon as it's over," she'd insisted. "I want to hear every detail while it's still fresh." The taxi arrived right on time, driven by an older gentleman who complimented my outfit as he held the door. "Special occasion?" he asked as we pulled away from my house. "My son's wedding," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "Well, he's a lucky young man to have such an elegant mother," he said, meeting my eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. I smiled but didn't correct his assumption that I would be sitting in the place of honor, surrounded by family and friends, proudly watching my only child begin his new life. Let him believe what any normal person would, that mothers belonged at their children's weddings. The church was beautiful, one of those historic downtown churches with soaring ceilings and stained glass windows that cast rainbow patterns across the stone floors. The Whites had clearly spared no expense. White roses and baby's breath adorned every pew, and yards of white silk ribbon created an aisle that looked like a pathway to heaven itself. I arrived early, deliberately timing my entrance to avoid the main crowd. A young usher in a perfectly tailored tuxedo approached me with a smile. "Welcome. Are you with the bride or the groom?" "The groom," I said, "but I'd prefer to sit in the back, please." He looked momentarily confused. Family typically sat in the front, but recovered quickly. "Of course. Right this way." I took my seat in the very back row, just as Ryan had undoubtedly hoped I would if I came at all. From here I could see everything without being seen. The ushers in their matching tuxedos, the guests in their carefully chosen outfits, the photographer who moved around like a dancer, capturing every angle of Olivia's perfect day. As the church filled with guests, I recognized some faces from Ryan's past. His college roommate Tim, now a successful attorney. His first boss from the investment firm who'd always sent me Christmas cards. Some neighbors from the house where he'd grown up. These were people who'd known me when I was still visible in Ryan's life, before Olivia had helped him understand that his past was something to be managed rather than celebrated. A few of them noticed me and waved, confused expressions crossing their faces. They probably wondered why I was sitting alone in the back instead of in the front row where the mother of the groom belonged. I smiled and waved back, giving no indication that anything was amiss. As the church continued to fill, I observed Olivia's family taking up the first 3 rows on the bride's side. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, all dressed like they'd stepped out of a wedding magazine. Her father, Harold White, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a perfect tan, kept checking his watch with the nervous energy of someone who'd invested heavily in making sure everything went according to plan. On Ryan's side, the first row sat empty except for Tim's parents. The mother of the groom's row, traditionally the place of honor, remained vacant, a missing tooth in an otherwise perfect smile. At exactly 11 o'clock a.m., the music began. Wagner's bridal chorus filled the church with its familiar promise of new beginnings and happy endings. The congregation rose as one, and I rose with them, watching as Olivia appeared at the back of the church like a vision in white silk and French lace. She was beautiful, I had to admit. 28 years old with long blonde hair and the kind of naturally perfect features that photographed well from every angle. Her dress probably cost more than I used to make in 6 months, and she moved down the aisle with the confidence of someone who had never doubted she deserved the very best life had to offer. But it was Ryan I couldn't stop watching. My son stood at the altar in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, his dark hair styled with just the right amount of product, his face glowing with joy and anticipation. This was what happiness looked like on my son. Pure, uncomplicated, unaware of any shadow or complexity. He looked like a man who'd successfully arranged his life exactly as he wanted it, who'd removed all obstacles to his perfect future. As Olivia reached the altar and took his arm, Ryan's smile was so bright it could have powered the entire church. This was the smile I'd lived for during all those years of sacrifice. The smile that had made every double shift and secondhand purchase worth it. Seeing it now, knowing what I knew, felt like watching a beautiful sunset before a hurricane. The ceremony was everything a high society wedding should be: elegant, traditional, flawlessly executed. The minister spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together, about the importance of family and the bonds that endure beyond all challenges. I watched Ryan's face as he listened, wondering if he heard the irony in the minister's words. Family bonds that endure, unless they clash with your fiancé's aesthetic preferences. Ryan and Olivia exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to love and honor each other, to put each other first, to build a future based on trust and mutual respect. "You are my rock, my foundation," Ryan told Olivia, his voice carrying clearly through the church. "With you, I've found the family I've always wanted." The family he'd always wanted. As if the family that had sustained him for 34 years, the mother who had sacrificed everything, had never existed. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Ryan kissed his bride and the congregation erupted in applause, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Pride. He looked so handsome, so happy. Loss. This should have been a moment we shared, a culmination of all the years I'd invested in his future. And something else, something that felt like completion. This was the last time I would ever see my son smile with uncomplicated joy. In about an hour, everything would change for him, and it would be my doing. Part of me, the part that had spent 34 years protecting him from every disappointment, wanted to tear up the envelope in my purse and let him keep his illusions. But the stronger part, the part that had finally learned the difference between love and self-destruction, knew this was necessary for both of us. The recessional began, and Ryan and Olivia walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. As they passed my row, Ryan's eyes swept the congregation, accepting congratulations and well wishes from their guests. For just a moment, his gaze landed on me. I saw the shock register on his face, surprise that I'd actually come, confusion about why I was sitting in the back, a flicker of what might have been embarrassment as he realized some of his guests had probably wondered why his mother wasn't in the family section. But his new wife was pulling him forward, and the photographer was calling for pictures, and the moment passed. Ryan's attention returned to his perfect day, and I became invisible again, exactly as he'd wanted. The receiving line formed in the narthex, and I waited until most of the guests had offered their congratulations before approaching. Olivia was radiant in her white dress, accepting compliments and admiration like someone accustomed to being the center of attention. Ryan stood beside her, one hand on her waist, playing the role of devoted husband with natural ease. When they saw me approaching, I watched a quick conversation pass between them in glances. Olivia's smile became slightly more fixed, and Ryan straightened his shoulders like someone preparing for an unpleasant but manageable task. "Mom," he said when I reached them, surprise still evident in his voice. "You came?" "Of course I came," I replied, my voice steady. "You're my son." Olivia extended her hand with the gracious smile of someone who'd been taught good manners from birth. "Mrs. Jones, thank you so much for being here. You look lovely." She was lying, of course, but she was lying beautifully, the way people do when good breeding demands politeness regardless of personal feelings. "Thank you, Olivia. You make a beautiful bride. Ryan is very lucky." "We both are," Ryan said, and I heard the message beneath his words. Lucky to have each other. Lucky to be starting fresh. Lucky to be free of complications from the past. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small wrapped gift, a silver picture frame I'd bought specifically for this moment. "Just a little something for your new home," I said, offering it to them. "Thank you," Olivia said, accepting the gift with another perfect smile. "That's so thoughtful." What they didn't see was me palming the envelope from my purse as I handed over the gift. What they didn't notice was me slipping it into Ryan's tuxedo jacket when I leaned in to give him a congratulatory hug. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered in his ear, and meant it. I was proud of the man he'd become, even if that man no longer had room in his life for the woman who'd made him possible. "Thanks, Mom," he whispered back, and for just a moment, he sounded like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Then Olivia was pulling him away to greet more guests, and I was forgotten again. Just another well-wisher in a long line of people celebrating their perfect beginning. I made my way toward the exit, stopping to chat briefly with old acquaintances, accepting compliments on how well I looked, deflecting questions about why I wasn't sitting with family. To everyone else, I probably seemed like a proud mother who'd raised a successful son and was now graciously stepping back to let him build his new life. If only they knew. As I waited for my taxi outside the church, I thought about the envelope now burning in Ryan's jacket pocket. Inside was a letter I'd written and rewritten a dozen times, outlining everything: the properties, the investments, the total worth of the mother he'd discarded. The final lines were the ones I'd labored over most. "By the time you read this, I will have changed my will. Every penny I've spent decades accumulating, money that would have secured your children's futures and beyond, will now help women who, like me, need to learn their own worth. Women who have been told they are less valuable as they age, less worthy of respect and consideration. You chose to erase me from your perfect picture. I've chosen to erase you from mine. Call William Davis on Monday morning. He'll explain everything." By Tuesday, the mother Ryan had considered too unattractive to acknowledge would be officially dead to him, even as she began to truly live for the first time. I didn't have to wait until Tuesday. Sarah called me at 8:30 Sunday morning, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. "Nancy, turn on your phone. Turn on everything. Check your email, your voicemail, all of it." I'd spent Saturday evening and Sunday morning in deliberate isolation, phones turned off, curtains drawn, existing in the peaceful bubble of a decision made and consequences set in motion. I'd known that once Ryan found the envelope, and he would find it, probably while changing out of his tuxedo at the hotel, my quiet life would explode into chaos. I'd wanted one last night of peace before the storm. Now, apparently, the storm had arrived. I powered up my cell phone. The screen immediately lit up with notifications. 17 missed calls, all from Ryan, starting at 7:15 p.m. yesterday and continuing until just an hour ago. A dozen text messages with increasing urgency. 3 voicemails. My voicemail was full. I listened to them in chronological order, watching my son's perfect wedding day disintegrate in real time. Message 1, Saturday evening, 7:15 p.m. "Mom, I found your envelope. Very funny. Call me back so we can talk about this like adults." He thought it was a joke. A manipulation, maybe, designed to get his attention. He had no idea. Message 7, Saturday, 11:30 p.m. $2.6 million. Are you insane? Where did this money come from? How long have you been lying to me about everything? The disbelief in his voice was almost funny. My son, who thought he knew everything about his poor, pathetic mother, discovering she'd been living a completely different life than the one he'd imagined. Message 13, Sunday, 2:15 a.m. Olivia's father knows about this. Someone saw your letter, and now her whole family knows you were at the wedding to what? Humiliate us? Olivia's locked herself in the bathroom. She won't even look at me. What have you done? So word had spread. Somehow the contents of my letter had become public knowledge at the reception. I wondered if Ryan had been careless, or if someone had seen him reading it and demanded to know what was wrong. Either way, my final gift to him had been even more public than I'd planned. Message 17, Sunday, 7:45 a.m. I'm coming over. We're going to fix this. Whatever's wrong with you, whatever I did, we can work it out. You can't just destroy my life because you're angry about the wedding. This is insane, Mom. You're acting insane." I wasn't acting insane. For the first time in decades, I was acting completely sane. Sarah arrived before Ryan did, carrying coffee and pastries and the fierce loyalty of a friendship that had weathered decades. She found me sitting calmly at my kitchen table, still in my robe, looking remarkably peaceful for someone who had just detonated her son's life. "Tell me everything," she said, settling into the chair across from me. I told her about the letter, how I'd written it to explain not just what Ryan was losing, but who he was losing. How I detailed every sacrifice, every property purchase, every investment decision made with his future in mind. How I'd explained that the shabby old woman he was embarrassed to claim had built a fortune that would have secured his children's children's futures. "And now it's all going to help other women instead," Sarah said with satisfaction. "Every penny." "What about Olivia?" Sarah asked, stirring sugar into her coffee. I almost laughed. "According to Ryan's messages, her father is reassessing the marriage. Apparently, marrying a man whose mother publicly humiliated him at his own wedding isn't the social coup they thought they were making." I paused. "Especially when that mother turns out to have more money than they do." Sarah's eyes widened. "More than the Whites? Are you serious?" I had William do some discreet research. Harold White's worth about $2.2 million. He's leveraged to the hilt. Big house, big expenses, big lifestyle. His investment firm does well, but not as well as everyone thinks." Sarah shook her head in amazement. "Nancy Jones, you are full of surprises." The doorbell rang at 9:15. Through the peephole, I could see Ryan pacing on my front porch, still wearing his tuxedo pants and dress shirt from the night before, his bow tie hanging loose around his neck. His hair was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked like a man who'd spent his wedding night in hell. Good. I opened the door and stepped aside to let him in. He brushed past me into the living room, spinning around to face me with the wild energy of someone running on adrenaline and desperation. "Mom, what have you done?" His voice cracked on the question. "Hello, Ryan. How was your wedding night?" I asked calmly, closing the door. He stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. "My wedding night?" "My wedding night was spent explaining to my wife's family why my mother ambushed us with some insane story about secret millions and revenge schemes. Olivia won't even talk to me. Her father is talking about annulment. My life is destroyed." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely meaning it. I hadn't wanted to hurt him. Not really. I just wanted him to understand what he'd done. "You're sorry?" His voice rose an octave. "You're sorry? You orchestrated this. You planned this whole thing." I walked to my chair, the same chair where I'd sat listening to him tell me I was too unattractive for his happiness, and settled myself calmly. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked, gesturing to the pot Sarah had brought. "Coffee?" Ryan looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Are you completely insane? I want to know where you got $2.6 million, and I want to know why you're giving it away to strangers instead of to your own son." Sarah, who'd been watching this exchange from the kitchen doorway, stepped forward. "Maybe because your son told her she was too ugly to come to his wedding," she said, her voice hard as flint. Ryan's head whipped toward her. "This is between me and my mother." "No," Sarah said quietly. "This is between a woman and the child who threw her away the moment she became inconvenient." "You don't understand," Ryan began. "I understand perfectly," Sarah cut him off. "I've watched Nancy sacrifice everything for you for 34 years. I watched her work double shifts to pay for your college. I watched her give you down payment money for your house while she kept driving that old car. I watched her turn down every social invitation, every chance for her own happiness, because she was always available in case you needed something. Ryan looked between us, and I could see him realizing that this wasn't just about the wedding, wasn't just about Olivia's aesthetic preferences. This was about a pattern he'd never bothered to examine. "Mom," Ryan said, his voice softer now, pleading. "I know I handled the wedding wrong. I was trying to keep peace with Olivia's family, trying to make sure everything went smoothly. I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me, Ryan," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And more importantly, you showed me exactly how you see me. Not as a person deserving respect and love, but as a problem to be managed." "That's not true," he protested. "Isn't it? When's the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When's the last time you asked about my life, my interests, my dreams? When's the last time you treated me like someone whose feelings mattered?" He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. "The nursing home," I continued. "Ryan, you and Olivia had already looked into putting me in a nursing home because I was inconvenient, because an elderly woman with my own life and opinions didn't fit into your perfect picture." "We thought it would be better for you," he insisted. "You thought it would be better for you," I corrected. "You thought it would be easier to park me somewhere out of sight so you wouldn't have to think about me anymore." Ryan sank into my couch, his head in his hands. "What do you want me to do? How do I fix this?" It was the question I'd been waiting for, and the answer came easier than I'd expected. "You can't fix this, Ryan. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together." "But I love you. You're my mother," he said, looking up at me with the same brown eyes that had gazed at me from a crib, from a kindergarten classroom, from a college graduation stage. "Love isn't just a feeling, sweetheart," I said gently. "It's how you treat people. It's how you prioritize them in your life. It's whether you make space for them, even when it's inconvenient." I moved toward the window, looking out at the garden I'd planted, the life I'd built. "You don't love me, Ryan. You love the idea of me, the devoted mother who exists to serve your needs and asks for nothing in return." "That's not fair," he protested. I turned back to face him. Fair? Was it fair that I worked 60-hour weeks so you could have name-brand clothes? Was it fair that I never dated, never remarried, because I didn't want to complicate your life with a stepfather? Was it fair that I gave you every opportunity to build the life you wanted while I built nothing for myself? Helen cleared her throat. "Nancy, I think you should tell him about Tuesday." Ryan looked up sharply. "What about Tuesday?" I'd been planning to let him find out from William Davis, but looking at my son now, disheveled, desperate, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what he'd lost, I realized I wanted to deliver this news myself. "Tuesday, I'm meeting with a realtor about selling this house," I said calmly. "You're selling the house? Where will you go?" Ryan asked, confusion replacing anger in his expression. "Wednesday. I'm closing my bank accounts and transferring everything to my new accounts in Switzerland," I continued, watching his face. "Switzerland? What are you talking about?" "Thursday. I'm flying to Europe with Sarah for an indefinite stay." The color drained from Ryan's face. "You're leaving? Just like that?" "I'm starting over," I corrected him. "At 68, I'm finally going to find out what it's like to live for myself instead of for someone who doesn't appreciate the sacrifice." "But what if you get sick? What if you need help?" His voice had taken on a note of panic. "I'll hire help," I said simply. "I can afford it now that I'm not supporting an ungrateful child." Ryan stood up abruptly, pacing again. "This is insane. You can't just disappear. You can't just abandon your family." The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. "Ryan, you already abandoned me. You just expected me to sit quietly in whatever corner you assigned me until you decided you needed something." "But the money," he said, his voice rising. "The money is..." The money is going to women who actually need it, I interrupted. Women who are trying to rebuild their lives after men like you decided they were disposable. Men like me? His voice cracked. I'm not some monster. I made one mistake. No, Ryan, I said quietly. You made 1,000 small mistakes every day for years. The wedding was just the day you finally said out loud what your actions had been telling me all along. He looked around my small house as if seeing it for the first time, really seeing it. The modest furniture, the carefully maintained everything. The life lived small so his could be large. I had no idea about the money, he said finally. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I was saving it for my old age, for the day I couldn't take care of myself. I was trying to make sure I'd never be a burden on you. I smiled sadly. Turns out I was already a burden, just not a financial one. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Can't we start over? Can't we try again? For just a moment, looking at him sitting there in his wrinkled wedding clothes, I saw the little boy who used to climb into my lap for bedtime stories, the teenager who brought me dandelions and called them flowers, the young man who used to tell people his mom was his hero. I'm 68 years old, Ryan, I said gently. I don't have time to wait for you to grow into the man I tried to raise you to be. The finality in my voice must have reached him because he started crying then, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Please don't do this. Please don't leave me. But it was too late for sorry. Sorry was what you said before you destroyed someone's life, not after. Sarah appeared at my elbow. Nancy, we should go. The realtor is coming at 11. I nodded, grateful for the escape. I couldn't watch Ryan cry without feeling the old instinct to comfort him, to fix his pain, even when he'd caused mine. As we headed for the door, Ryan called out one last time. Mom, please, I'll do anything. I'll make this right. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Ryan, I spent 34 years trying to make you into someone who wouldn't need to make this right. That was my choice. Now I'm making a different one. We left him sitting in my living room, surrounded by the modest life I'd built while secretly creating something magnificent. By the time Sarah and I returned that evening, he was gone. 3 days after the wedding, I sat in Dr. Jennifer Reynolds' office, staring at the black and white images on the light box. The small mass in my right breast seemed impossibly tiny to cause such turmoil. Stage 2 breast cancer, Dr. Reynolds said, her voice gentle but direct. The good news is we caught it early, during your routine mammogram. The prognosis is excellent with treatment. I nodded, oddly calm. After the emotional tsunami of the past month, Ryan's rejection, changing my will, the wedding confrontation, this felt almost manageable in comparison. What are my options? I asked. Given the size and location, I recommend a lumpectomy followed by radiation, possibly chemotherapy depending on the final pathology. She leaned forward, her kind eyes meeting mine. Mrs. Jones, I know this is a lot to process, but I want to emphasize that this is very treatable. Your overall health is excellent, and we have every reason to expect a full recovery. How soon do we need to start? I'd like to schedule surgery within the next 2 weeks, ideally. Then we'll develop the rest of your treatment plan based on what we find. I thought about the airline tickets to Switzerland sitting in my email inbox, scheduled for the following Thursday. About the appointment with the realtor to list my house, set for tomorrow. About the life I'd been planning to build, free from the past. Would it be possible to have the treatment in Switzerland? I asked. I have plans to relocate there. Dr. Reynolds raised her eyebrows. Switzerland has excellent medical care, certainly, but starting treatment in a new country, with new doctors, new systems, It adds a layer of complexity during an already difficult time. May I ask why the move is so urgent? I considered how to explain the seismic shifts in my life over the past month. I'm making some changes, I said finally. Important ones. She nodded thoughtfully. I understand wanting a fresh start, but medically speaking, I'd recommend beginning your treatment here, where you have established care and support systems. Perhaps delay your move until you've completed the initial phase of treatment. It made sense, of course. Starting cancer treatment while simultaneously relocating to a foreign country would be challenging, to say the least. How long would the initial phase last? I asked. The lumpectomy is an outpatient procedure with a recovery time of about 2 weeks. If radiation is needed, that typically runs 5 days a week for 3 to 6 weeks. Chemotherapy, if necessary, would be more extensive, usually several months. Several months of delay, several months of remaining in this town, in this house, with the memories and the proximity to Ryan. The thought made my stomach tighten. I need some time to consider my options, I said finally. Dr. Reynolds wrote a prescription for anti-anxiety medication, just in case you need it while making these decisions, and scheduled a follow-up appointment for the following week. Mrs. Jones, she said as I gathered my things to leave, I know this isn't the news you wanted today, but please remember you're not alone in this. But I was alone in many ways. By my own choice, certainly, but alone nonetheless. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just as I'd finally decided to start living for myself, my body had other ideas. Sarah was waiting in the reception area, flipping through a magazine without seeing it. She looked up when I emerged, her expression a question. Stage 2 breast cancer, I said quietly. Her face paled, but she recovered quickly. What's the treatment plan? Surgery, then radiation, maybe chemotherapy. I sat beside her, suddenly exhausted. She wants to start within 2 weeks. So we postponed Switzerland, Sarah said decisively. We? I looked at her, surprised. You didn't think I'd let you go through this alone, did you? She squeezed my hand. We'll reschedule our great adventure for after you kick cancer's ass. In the car, I filled Sarah in on the details as she drove us back to my house. The prognosis, the treatment options, the timeline. Have you told Ryan? She asked as we pulled into my driveway. I shook my head. I just found out myself. Are you going to tell him? It was a good question. Ryan had called daily since the wedding confrontation, leaving increasingly desperate messages. I hadn't returned any of them, still raw from the pain he'd inflicted, still committed to my new path. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me thinks he doesn't deserve to know. Part of me... I trailed off. Part of you still loves him, Sarah finished for me. He's still your son. Yes, I whispered, tears finally coming. But he's also the man who told me I was too ugly to attend his wedding, who planned to put me in a nursing home because I was inconvenient. Sarah turned off the engine and faced me. Nancy, I will support whatever decision you make. If you want to cut him off completely, I'm behind you 100%. If you want to try to rebuild some kind of relationship, I'll support that too. But please, make the decision based on what you need right now, not on what you think he deserves. Inside my house, I sank onto the couch, suddenly overwhelmed by everything. The cancer diagnosis, the upcoming surgery, the uncertain future. Sarah bustled around my kitchen, making tea and toast, giving me space to process. My phone buzzed with another call from Ryan. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of uncertainty. Did I want to face cancer without my only child? Did I want to deny him the opportunity to make amends, however inadequate those amends might be? Or was this just another example of putting his needs before my own? giving him the chance to feel better about himself by supporting me through illness, even after he'd rejected me when I was healthy. "Sarah," I called, making a sudden decision. "Would you hand me my phone, please?" She brought it to me, raising an eyebrow when she saw Ryan's name on the screen. "You're calling him back?" "No," I said, declining the call. "I'm texting him." I composed a brief message. "Ryan, I need space and time to process recent events. Please respect this by not calling or visiting for now. I'll contact you if I'm ready to talk." After sending it, I blocked his number. Not permanently, just for now. Just until I could think clearly about what I wanted, not what a lifetime of maternal instinct told me I should want. "What now?" Sarah asked, sitting beside me with 2 mugs of tea. "Now we make a new plan," Sarah said. "I still want to sell this house. Still want to start fresh, but maybe not in Switzerland. Not yet." "What about a compromise?" Sarah suggested. "What if we find a place in California, near my daughter? You could get your treatment at one of the excellent medical centers there, and we'd still be having our adventure, just on a slightly different timeline." "California," I repeated, considering it. Sunshine, ocean, 3,000 miles from Ryan and Olivia and the Whites. I've always wanted to see the Pacific. "So it's settled," Sarah said, raising her mug in a toast. "To new beginnings, just with a slight detour." I clinked my mug against hers. "To new beginnings." That night I sat on my back porch watching the stars emerge one by one. The rose bushes I'd tended for 15 years swayed gently in the evening breeze, their buds promising blooms I might not be here to see. The irony wasn't lost on me. For decades I'd put my life on hold to raise Ryan, to give him every advantage. Now that I'd finally decided to live for myself, to use my carefully accumulated resources for my own joy, my body had thrown up this roadblock. But it was just that, a roadblock, not a dead end. Dr. Reynolds had been clear. With treatment, my prognosis was excellent. I could still have the life I was just beginning to imagine for myself. It would just take a little longer, require a little more patience. As I sipped my tea and contemplated the stars, I felt an unexpected sense of peace settle over me. Cancer was just another challenge to overcome, another obstacle to navigate. I'd spent my entire life being stronger than I thought possible. This would be no different. My phone chimed with a text from Sarah. "Made an appointment with a California realtor for next week. Virtual tour of 3 ocean view condos. Wear something beachy." I smiled. Whatever came next. Cancer treatment, a move across the country, the complicated emotions surrounding Ryan. I wouldn't face it alone. For the first time in my adult life, I had someone firmly in my corner, someone who saw me not as a supportive extra in their life story, but as the protagonist of my own. Ryan had left 17 more messages over the next few days, then 10, then 5, then 1 just before I blocked his number. "Mom, I know you'll probably never forgive me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I finally understand what I lost. Not just the money. You. I lost you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life wishing I could take back that phone call." It was a good apology. Heartfelt, specific, free of excuses. It was also about 20 years too late. I looked again at the stars scattered across the velvet sky. Tomorrow would bring doctor's appointments, treatment plans, real estate listings. But tonight was for dreaming, of California sunshine, of Pacific waves, of a life reborn from the ashes of the old. Nancy Jones was about to disappear, but not in the way I'd originally planned. Instead of running away to Switzerland, I would transform right here, shedding the old life like a snake sheds its skin, emerging new and whole and ready for whatever came next. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Sarah asked, watching me sign the final paperwork for the sale of my house. "We could always rent it out instead. Keep it as a safety net." I shook my head, passing the documents back to the realtor. No safety nets, no looking back. It had been 2 weeks since my cancer diagnosis, and in that time I'd moved with uncharacteristic speed. The house had sold in 3 days to a young family with 2 small children who'd fallen in love with the rose garden. I'd accepted an offer slightly below asking price when I saw how the little girl had run straight to the window seat in the living room, already claiming it as her special reading nook. "Congratulations," the realtor said, handing me a copy of the closing documents. "The funds will be transferred to your account by end of day tomorrow." As we walked to Sarah's car, I took one last look at the house I'd called home for 30 years. The memories crowded in, bringing baby Ryan home, teaching him to ride a bike in the driveway, celebrating his acceptance to college at the kitchen table. "Second thoughts?" Sarah asked gently. "No," I said, surprised to find it was true. "Just saying goodbye." Our next stop was First National Bank, where I'd maintained accounts for decades. The branch manager, Dave Wilson, greeted me with a concerned smile. "Mrs. Jones, I was sorry to hear about your health situation. How are you feeling?" News traveled fast in small towns. "I'm doing well, Dave, thank you, but I've decided to make some changes." I handed him the necessary forms. "I'd like to close all my accounts today and transfer the balances to this account in California." His eyebrows rose slightly as he reviewed the paperwork. "That's a significant amount to transfer, Mrs. Jones. Are you relocating permanently?" "I am," I confirmed. "Sarah and I are moving to California next week." "Together?" Dave glanced between us, clearly recalibrating his understanding of our relationship. Sarah snorted. "As roommates, Dave. Don't get excited." His face reddened. "Of course, I didn't mean to—" "It's fine," I assured him. "We found a lovely condo in Monterey, perfect for my recovery and our new start." Dave nodded, still looking slightly flustered. "Well, everything seems in order. The transfer should complete within 48 hours. As we left the bank, Sarah chuckled. "Poor Dave. 30 years of seeing you as the quiet widow, and now you're liquidating assets worth millions and running off to California with another woman." "Scandalous," I agreed, unable to suppress a smile. Back at Sarah's house, where I'd been staying since selling mine, we finalized our packing. Most of my furniture and household goods had gone to charity or been sold, leaving only what would fit in 6 large suitcases. "It's liberating, isn't it?" Sarah observed, watching me fold a sweater I'd owned for 20 years. "Letting go of all this stuff?" "It is," I agreed. "Though I keep wondering if I'll regret not keeping more." "That's what IKEA is for," Sarah declared. New life, new furniture. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Reynolds confirming my pre-surgery appointment for the following day. The lumpectomy was scheduled for 3 days later, after which we'd fly to California to begin our new life, and my radiation treatments at Stanford Medical Center. William Davis had arranged everything from the legal standpoint. My name change paperwork had been processed with surprising efficiency, transforming me from Nancy Jones to Nancy Sarah Miller, taking Sarah's maiden name, new driver's license, new social security card, new passport, all waiting for me in a neat folder on Sarah's dining table. "How do you feel about tomorrow?" Sarah asked as we sat on her porch that evening, watching the sunset. "The appointment, I mean." "Nervous," I admitted, "but ready." Dr. Reynolds had been surprised when I'd told her of my decision to have surgery here, but continue treatment in California. She'd made her concerns clear, but ultimately respected my choice, even helping arrange for my records to be transferred to my new oncologist at Stanford. "I talked to Melissa this morning," Sarah said, referring to her daughter in California. She's got the guest room all ready for us. Says we can stay as long as we need while the condo paperwork finalizes. That's very generous of her, I said. I hope I'm not imposing on your relationship. Sarah waved this away. Melissa's thrilled. She's been trying to get me to move closer for years. You're just giving her the perfect excuse. As dusk settled around us, I thought about Ryan. I'd unblocked his number last week, but there had been no new calls or texts. Just silence. According to Sarah's cousin Margaret, who still attended the same church as Ryan's former neighbor, he and Olivia had postponed their honeymoon. Rumors swirled about trouble in the brand new marriage. I felt a twinge of guilt, quickly suppressed. Ryan had made his choices. Now he was living with the consequences. Nancy, Sarah said, interrupting my thoughts. There's something we need to discuss. Her tone made me sit up straighter. What is it? I've been thinking about your cancer treatment, your move, everything that's happening so quickly. She took a deep breath. Have you considered what might happen if things don't go as planned? If the cancer is more advanced than they thought, or if there are complications? I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead. The diagnosis had seemed manageable, just another obstacle to overcome on my way to freedom. I guess I haven't, I admitted. Sarah reached over and took my hand. I think we need a contingency plan, a way to make sure your story gets told, whatever happens. My story? About the money, about Ryan, about how you built this life that no one knew about. Sarah squeezed my hand. I was thinking, what if we let people believe you didn't make it through the surgery? I stared at her. You want me to fake my death? Not fake it exactly. Just not correct the assumption if it arises. Sarah, that's... Hear me out, she interrupted. You're already changing your name, moving across the country, starting completely fresh. If something happens during surgery, which it won't, but if it did, wouldn't you want Ryan to understand what he lost? To live with the full weight of his choices? I considered this, turning the idea over in my mind. There was something poetic about it. Nancy Jones, the mother Ryan had discarded, ceasing to exist entirely. It would be complicated, I said finally. Legally speaking. William could help with the details, Sarah suggested. We wouldn't be faking a death certificate or anything illegal, just not correcting people's assumptions. And if the surgery goes perfectly? If the cancer responds to treatment? Sarah smiled. Then Nancy Miller lives a wonderful life in California, while Nancy Jones becomes a memory, a cautionary tale about appreciating people before they're gone. I looked out at the darkening sky, considering. It was extreme, certainly, possibly even cruel. But hadn't Ryan's casual dismissal of me been equally cruel? Let me think about it, I said at last. That night I barely slept, my mind turning over Sarah's suggestion. By morning I'd made my decision. Let's do it, I told Sarah over coffee. Not as a fake death, but as a fresh start. If rumors spread that I didn't survive, we won't correct them. Nancy Jones will be gone, and Nancy Miller will begin. Sarah raised her coffee mug in salute. To Nancy Miller. The pre-surgery appointment went smoothly. Dr. Reynolds reviewed the procedure once more, answered my questions, and wished me well in California. You've made your decisions, and I respect that, she said as our appointment concluded. Just remember that isolation isn't good for healing. Make sure you're building a support system in your new home. I will, I promised, thinking of Sarah, her daughter Melissa, and the new life waiting for us. As we left the hospital, I saw a familiar figure hurrying toward the entrance. Ryan, his face drawn with worry. I froze, then quickly ducked behind a pillar, pulling Sarah with me. What's wrong? She asked. Ryan, I whispered. By the main doors. Sarah peered around the pillar. What's he doing here? I don't know. Maybe someone told him about my diagnosis? I felt my heart racing. After all my careful plans, I wasn't prepared to face him now. Let's go around to the side exit, Sarah suggested. My car's in the back lot anyway. We took the long way around, avoiding the main entrance. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Ryan speaking urgently to the receptionist at the information desk. Do you think he knows? I asked Sarah. About the surgery? Possibly. It's a small town. Should I talk to him? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Sarah glanced at me. Do you want to? I thought about it, truly considered what I wanted, rather than what maternal obligation might dictate. No, I said finally. I've said everything I needed to say. The day of surgery dawned clear and bright. Sarah drove me to the hospital at 5:30 a.m., the roads empty in the early morning light. As the nurses prepared me for the procedure, I felt a strange calm settle over me. We'll take good care of you, Mrs. Jones, the anesthesiologist assured me as he prepared the sedative. It's Miller, actually, I corrected him, catching Sarah's eye with a small smile. Nancy Miller. My mistake, he said, adjusting my chart. Count backward from 10 for me, Mrs. Miller. 10, 9, 8, I began, and then darkness took me. I woke to the sound of beeping machines and Sarah's face hovering above me. There you are, she said, smiling through tears. You gave us quite a scare. My throat felt dry, my chest tender. What happened? The tumor was a bit more involved than they expected. You lost more blood than anticipated, but Dr. Reynolds got it all. Sarah squeezed my hand. You're going to be fine. I tried to sit up, but found myself too weak. When can we leave for California? Let's focus on getting you out of this hospital first, Sarah said gently. One step at a time. As I drifted in and out of consciousness that first day, I became aware of voices in the hallway outside my room. Dr. Reynolds, and a male voice I recognized immediately. Ryan. I understand privacy laws, doctor, but she's my mother, he was saying, his voice tight with emotion. I just need to know she's all right. Mr. Jones, as I've explained, I can neither confirm nor deny whether your mother is a patient here, Dr. Reynolds replied. If she is, and if she wanted you to know about her condition, she would have authorized us to speak with you. Please, Ryan's voice cracked. I know we've had problems, but if she's sick, if she needs help. I'm sorry, Dr. Reynolds said firmly. I can't help you. I closed my eyes as footsteps retreated down the hall, trying to ignore the pang of guilt. This was my choice, my new beginning. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Sarah had arranged for a private nurse to help me during my recovery at her house, a necessary expense given our imminent cross-country move. William Davis visited the day after my discharge, bringing the final paperwork for my name change and the documents transferring my investment accounts to my new identity. Everything is in order, he assured me. Nancy Miller now officially exists, with all the necessary history and documentation. And Nancy Jones? I asked. Legally, she still exists, William explained. But as we discussed, if rumors of her passing should circulate, there would be no official contradiction. You've authorized no one to receive medical information, filed no change of address, essentially disappeared as far as the system is concerned. Thank you, William, I said, signing the last of the documents. For everything. He hesitated, then asked, Have you given any more thought to contacting your son before you leave? I shook my head. I've made my decision. As William prepared to leave, he handed me a sealed envelope. Ryan came to my office yesterday. He asked me to give you this, if I happen to know your whereabouts. I stared at the envelope, my name written in Ryan's familiar handwriting. "You don't have to read it," Sarah said after William left. "You could just throw it away." I turned the envelope over in my hands. "No, I'll read it. But it won't change anything." Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Ryan's handwriting. "Mom, I've learned you're in the hospital. No one will tell me why or how serious it is. I've tried calling, texting, even coming to your house only to find it sold. I understand why you won't see me. What I did was unforgivable. Olivia and I have separated. My choice, not hers. I couldn't continue with someone who saw my own mother as an inconvenience, a flaw in her perfect picture. I don't expect forgiveness, but please let me know you're okay. Whatever's happening, you don't have to face it alone. I love you. I'm sorry. Ryan." I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. "Well?" Sarah prompted. "He's sorry," I said simply. "It doesn't change anything." But that night, as Sarah slept in the next room, I found myself composing a reply. Not out of obligation or guilt, but out of a need for final closure. "Ryan, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Not in the way you might fear, but gone nonetheless. I'm starting a new life, in a new place, with a new name. I read your letter. I believe you're sorry. But some wounds can't be healed with apologies, no matter how sincere. Know this. I loved being your mother. Through all the sacrifices, all the long nights and tight budgets, I never regretted choosing that role. What I regret is teaching you that my worth was tied to your needs, that my purpose was to exist in relation to you, rather than as a person in my own right. Don't look for me, Ryan. Nancy Jones no longer exists. In her place is a woman discovering for the first time who she is beyond motherhood. I hope you find happiness. I hope you become the man I always believed you could be. Most of all, I hope you remember that everyone, even mothers, deserves to be seen, respected, and valued. Goodbye, Mom. I sealed the letter in an envelope addressed to Ryan with instructions for William to deliver it after we'd left for California. 2 weeks after my surgery, Sarah and I boarded a flight to San Francisco, where Melissa would meet us and drive us to Monterey. As the plane took off, I watched my old hometown recede into the distance, feeling the weight of Nancy Jones's life falling away with each passing mile. The funeral was beautiful, or so I heard. William Davis forwarded me the newspaper obituary, published 3 weeks after our arrival in California. Nancy Jones, 68, passed peacefully after a brief illness. A devoted mother and respected member of the community, Mrs. Jones will be remembered for her quiet strength and generous spirit. She is survived by her son, Ryan Jones. Private services have been held in accordance with her wishes. Short, simple, and almost entirely fictional, except for the private services part, which was technically true, as there had been none. According to William, Ryan had tried to claim my body, only to be told gently that there was no body to claim, that I had chosen cremation, with specific instructions that there be no service, no gathering, no fuss, just a simple end to a life that had been, in my final assessment, too much about other people and not enough about myself. The irony, of course, was that Nancy Jones wasn't actually dead. She was sitting on a terrace in Monterey, California, watching the sun set over the Pacific, while recovering from a lumpectomy and preparing for radiation treatments. "How does it feel to read your own obituary?" Sarah asked, handing me a glass of white wine, my first since surgery. "Surreal," I admitted, "but also freeing." Our condo exceeded every expectation. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an open-concept living area, and most importantly, a spacious terrace with an unobstructed ocean view. After decades of living modestly to build my investment portfolio, spending some of that money on luxury felt both decadent and deserved. My radiation treatments began a week after our arrival. 5 days a week for 6 weeks, I'd sit in the waiting room at Stanford Medical Center, surrounded by others fighting their own battles, then lie perfectly still as the machine did its work. The side effects were manageable: fatigue, some skin irritation, but far less debilitating than I'd feared. Sarah drove me to every appointment, waited patiently during each session, and never once complained about putting her own new beginning on hold to support mine. "You're a terrible roommate, you know," I told her one evening as she brought me tea and my medication. "How so?" she asked, settling beside me on the terrace. "You're making it impossible for me to ever live alone again. I've gotten used to having someone bring me tea and remind me to take my pills." She laughed. "Well, get used to it. I'm not going anywhere." 2 months into our new life, with radiation treatments completed and my energy returning, I received another update from William Davis. This one included a clipping from the local paper back home. "White investment firm faces inquiry. Harold White, founder of White Investment Firm, faces regulatory scrutiny following allegations of financial improprieties." The investigation began after an anonymous whistleblower provided documentation suggesting White had misrepresented assets to investors. White's son-in-law, Ryan Jones, recently promoted to senior manager, has reportedly cooperated with investigators. "Well, well," Sarah said, reading over my shoulder. "Looks like Ryan chose a side after all." I reread the article, lingering on the phrase, "Ryan Jones, recently promoted to senior manager." Despite everything, a flicker of pride surfaced. He'd made his choice, chosen integrity over advancement, truth over family loyalty. "Do you think he knows Harold was lying?" Sarah asked. "He must," I replied. "Otherwise, why cooperate with investigators?" We speculated about what might have happened. Whether Ryan had discovered discrepancies himself, whether his separation from Olivia had freed him to act on his conscience, whether his experience with me had somehow influenced his decision. "Are you going to contact him?" Sarah asked carefully. I considered this, truly considered it, before shaking my head. "No. Nancy Jones is gone. Her relationship with Ryan ended with that last letter. Nancy Miller has no son." The words sounded harsh, even to my ears, but they reflected my reality. I'd made my choice just as Ryan had made his. We were on separate paths now. The hardest part of my recovery hadn't been the physical healing, but the emotional adjustment. After defining myself as Ryan's mother for so long, who was I now? What did Nancy Miller, not Jones, but Miller, want from life? I began exploring answers to those questions as my strength returned. I joined a writing group at the local library, surprising myself by sharing stories of my childhood that I'd never told anyone, not even Ryan. I took a watercolor class at the community center, discovering a talent for capturing the ever-changing moods of the Pacific. Sarah, meanwhile, had immersed herself in Monterey's vibrant community garden scene, quickly becoming known for her expertise with drought-resistant native plants. She'd also reconnected with her daughter Melissa, building the closer relationship they'd both wanted, but geography had prevented. "I never thought I'd say this," Sarah confessed one evening, 6 months into our California adventure. "But I'm glad you got cancer." I nearly choked on my wine. "Excuse me?" "Not the cancer itself," she clarified hastily. "That part was terrible. But if you hadn't gotten sick, we might have gone to Switzerland instead. We wouldn't have this." She gestured toward our terrace, the ocean view, the life we'd built. I understood what she meant. The cancer diagnosis had forced me to reconsider my impulsive plan to flee the country. It had made me focus on what I truly wanted, not just escape, but transformation, not just distance, but growth. "I'm glad too," I admitted, though I could have done without the surgery and radiation. "Details," Sarah said, waving dismissively, and we both laughed. As my first year of being dead approached, I received one final update from William Davis. This one was different. Not a newspaper clipping or legal document, but a personal note. Mrs. Miller, I thought you should know that your son has established a scholarship fund at the local community college. It's called the Nancy Jones Memorial Scholarship for Women in Transition, specifically for older women returning to education after raising families. In his application to establish the fund, which required board approval, he wrote, "My mother built an extraordinary life through determination, intelligence, and sacrifice, qualities that often go unrecognized in women of her generation. This scholarship honors her legacy by supporting women who demonstrate those same qualities as they seek to reinvent themselves. I thought you might want to know. Regards, William Davis." I read the note 3 times, emotions conflicting within me. Pride in Ryan's gesture, gratitude for the recognition of my life's work, sadness for what might have been, and something unexpected, a sense of peace. "He's honoring you," Sarah observed, reading over my shoulder. "In his own way." "Yes," I agreed. "He is." That night I dreamed about Ryan for the first time in months. In the dream, he was 7 years old again, crying because he'd scraped his knee falling off his bicycle. I cleaned the wound, put on a bandage, kissed it better, and watched him run back to his friends, completely recovered and completely confident that I would always be there to fix whatever went wrong. I woke feeling peaceful rather than sad. That little boy deserved to be loved unconditionally, protected, nurtured, celebrated. I'd given him all of that and more. The man he'd become had made his own choices about what to do with that foundation. Those choices had consequences, and one of those consequences was losing the woman who'd loved him more than life itself. But perhaps in losing me, he'd found something important, a recognition of his own capacity for cruelty, and a commitment to do better. The scholarship fund suggested as much. I'd made my choices too. I'd chosen to love myself enough to walk away, to value my own dignity enough to demand respect, to believe I deserved better than being treated like an embarrassment by the person I'd sacrificed everything for. Looking out at the Pacific in the early morning light, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, complete peace with my decisions. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, eyeing the elegant invitation in my hand. "It seems risky." 1 year to the day after my death, I'd received an unexpected letter forwarded by William Davis, an invitation to the launch of the Nancy Jones Memorial Scholarship Fund. The event would be held at the local community college back home, hosted by Ryan and supported by several local businesses. "I'm not going as Nancy Jones," I said, turning the invitation over in my hands. "I'd be attending as Nancy Miller, a donor interested in supporting women's education." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "With your face? The face that looks exactly like his dead mother's?" I touched my hair, now stylishly cut and highlighted with subtle blonde streaks, and the designer glasses I'd adopted in California. "People see what they expect to see. No one expects to see a ghost." "It's your decision," Sarah said, though her tone suggested she thought it was a bad one. "But why risk your new life just to watch him from across a room?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself since the invitation arrived. Why did I feel this pull to return, to witness this moment in Ryan's life when I'd worked so hard to sever all connections? "Closure, maybe," I suggested, "or curiosity." "Or you miss him," Sarah said gently. I couldn't deny it. Despite everything, despite the hurt and the anger and the new life I'd built, a part of me still wondered about my son, still cared what happened to him. "I won't approach him," I promised. "I'll just observe, then leave. He'll never know I was there." Sarah sighed. "I'm coming with you." Someone needs to drag you out if you start having second thoughts about this whole dead mother situation. The event was scheduled for the following month, giving us time to prepare. We booked flights and a hotel room in a neighboring town, minimizing the risk of running into anyone who might recognize me. If anyone asks, we're visiting from California to explore potential scholarship partnerships, Sarah rehearsed as our plane touched down. You're Nancy Miller, retired investment consultant. I'm Sarah Miller, your sister-in-law. Sister-in-law? I questioned. Why not just friend? Because sister-in-law explains why we have the same last name without suggesting we're a couple, Sarah explained. People make assumptions. The community college auditorium was decorated with tasteful banners announcing the Nancy Jones Memorial Scholarship. A table near the entrance displayed a large photograph of me, an old one from when Ryan graduated college, my face younger but unmistakably mine. This was a mistake, I murmured to Sarah as we entered. Someone will recognize me. Just keep your head down and remember, no one expects to see a dead woman at her own memorial, Sarah whispered back. We found seats near the back of the auditorium, positioned where we could observe without being observed. The room filled quickly. Local business leaders, college administrators, community members. I recognized many faces from my old life, though none seemed to take special notice of me. At precisely 7:00 p.m., Ryan walked onto the stage, looking more mature than when I'd last seen him. His suit was impeccable, his posture straight, his expression solemn. "Good evening," he began. "Thank you all for coming to support the launch of the Nancy Jones Memorial Scholarship Fund." From my seat in the back row, I watched my son speak about the importance of education, about second chances, about recognizing the value and potential of women who had devoted their lives to caring for others. "My mother," he said, his voice catching slightly, "was the strongest person I've ever known. She raised me alone after my father died, working multiple jobs to ensure I had every opportunity. She sacrificed her own dreams so I could pursue mine." The audience nodded appreciatively, unaware that the woman being eulogized was sitting among them. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that while making those sacrifices, she was also quietly building something remarkable. Through careful investment and extraordinary financial discipline, my mother accumulated substantial assets that no one, including me, knew about. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was apparently news to many. "Before she died," Ryan continued, "she made a decision to donate her entire estate to the Women's Educational Foundation, an organization that helps women rebuild their lives after loss or hardship." Another murmur, louder this time. "This scholarship fund, which I've established in partnership with the foundation, honors her legacy by continuing that work locally. Each year we'll support 10 women over the age of 50 who are returning to education to build new careers and new lives." Pride swelled in my chest, unexpected and powerful. He understood. After everything, Ryan had understood what mattered to me. "I made mistakes with my mother," Ryan said, his voice dropping. "Mistakes I can't fix now that she's gone. But through this scholarship, her spirit, her belief in second chances, in reinvention, in the value of women's dreams, will continue." Tears pricked at my eyes. Sarah squeezed my hand in silent support. After Ryan's speech, 10 women were called to the stage, the first recipients of the Nancy Jones Memorial Scholarship. Each shared a brief story about why they were returning to school, what they hoped to achieve, how the scholarship would help them. Their stories mirrored my own in so many ways. Women who had put others first for decades, who had surrendered their own ambitions to care for children, husbands, parents. Women who were now, finally, pursuing their own paths. "Thank you, Nancy Jones, wherever you are," said the final recipient, a 63-year-old grandmother studying to become a paralegal. "Your legacy is giving us a second chance. If only she knew how literally her words could be taken. As the formal program concluded and attendees moved to a reception area for refreshments, Sarah and I prepared to make our exit. We'd seen what we came to see. Any longer would be pushing our luck. But as we rose to leave, a voice behind us froze me in place. "Excuse me, ma'am?" I turned slowly to find a middle-aged woman smiling at me. "Yes?" I managed, my heart pounding. "I noticed you taking notes during the presentation. Are you with one of the foundations?" Relief flooded through me. "Yes, we're from California, just here to observe how this scholarship program is structured. We're considering something similar in our community." "That's wonderful. You should really speak with Ryan Jones, the founder. He's just over there." Before I could decline, she was waving to Ryan, catching his attention. I froze as his eyes moved in our direction. "Time to go," Sarah muttered, taking my arm. "Now." But it was too late. Ryan was already making his way toward us, smiling politely at the woman who'd summoned him. "These ladies are from a foundation in California," she was saying. "They're interested in your scholarship model." Ryan extended his hand. "Ryan Jones. Thank you for coming." I took his hand automatically, my voice failing me. Up close, I could see the changes in him. Subtle lines around his eyes, a new seriousness in his expression. He looked at me with polite interest, showing no sign of recognition. "Nancy Miller," I said finally, finding my voice. "And this is Sarah Miller." "No relation," Sarah added quickly. "Just a coincidence." Ryan nodded, still showing no recognition. "What foundation are you with, Ms. Miller?" "We're with the Pacific Women's Alliance," I improvised. "We support educational initiatives for women in transition." "That's wonderful," Ryan said, his expression warming. "That's exactly the type of work my mother valued." It was surreal, standing before my son, being praised by him without being recognized. The disguise, my new hairstyle, glasses, different clothing style, and the simple fact that he believed me dead was working better than I could have imagined. "Your speech was very moving," I said carefully. "Your mother sounds like an extraordinary woman." A shadow crossed Ryan's face. "She was. I just wish I had realized it while she was still here." The rawness in his voice made my chest tighten. Before I could respond, another guest approached, needing Ryan's attention. "Please excuse me," he said, shaking our hands again. "But if you're interested in learning more about our scholarship structure, I'd be happy to meet with you tomorrow. Here's my card." I took it mechanically, mumbling something about being in touch, then allowed Sarah to guide me toward the exit. Once safely in our rental car, I let out a long, shaky breath. "He didn't recognize me." "Of course he didn't," Sarah said, starting the engine. "He thinks you're dead, Nancy. Dead people don't attend their own memorial scholarship launches." I turned Ryan's business card over in my hands. "He seems different." "He's grieving," Sarah pointed out as we pulled onto the main road. "Grief changes people." Back at our hotel, I paced the room, unable to settle. The encounter with Ryan had unsettled me more than I'd expected. Seeing him, speaking to him, hearing him talk about me with such respect and regret, it had awakened emotions I thought I'd put to rest. "You're thinking of contacting him, aren't you?" Sarah asked, watching me pace. "No," I said quickly. "That would be—" What? Cruel? Selfish? Dangerous to the new life I'd built? "It would be complicated," Sarah finished for me. "Very, very complicated." I stopped pacing and sat heavily on the edge of the bed. I just keep thinking about what he said, about wishing he'd realized what he had while I was still here. "He made his choices," Sarah reminded me. "Just like you made yours." "I know," I sighed, looking out the window at the town I'd once called home. "It's just harder than I expected, seeing him but not being seen." The next morning, as we prepared to check out of the hotel for our flight back to California, The front desk called our room. "Ms. Miller, there's a package for you at the front desk." Puzzled, I went downstairs to find a small, wrapped gift box waiting for me. The card attached read simply, "To Ms. Nancy Miller, thank you for your interest in our scholarship program. Ryan Jones." Inside the box was a small silver pendant in the shape of a rose, similar to one I'd owned years ago, a gift from Ryan on Mother's Day when he was 16. "How did he know where we were staying?" Sarah asked, examining the pendant. "He didn't send this," I said, a chill running down my spine. "At least not intentionally." "What do you mean?" I turned the pendant over, revealing a tiny inscription on the back. "To Mom, with love, Ryan." "This was my pendant," I whispered. "The one I lost years ago. He must have found it, kept it all this time." "But how did it end up here?" addressed to Nancy Miller, Sarah asked, clearly unsettled. We checked out quickly, both feeling a need to put distance between ourselves and the strange coincidence. As we drove toward the airport, I noticed Sarah taking a detour. "Where are we going? The airport's the other way." "One quick stop first," she said, turning onto a familiar road, the road leading to my old house. "Sarah, why, trust me," she said, pulling up across the street from what had once been my home. The rose bushes I'd planted were in full bloom, tended by the new owners with obvious care. The house looked well maintained, loved. "Why are we here?" I asked again. "Because you need closure," Sarah said simply. "Real closure, not just running away." As we sat watching my old house, a car pulled into the driveway, a car I recognized as Ryan's. He got out, carrying a bouquet of flowers, and walked not to the front door, but around to the backyard. "What is he doing?" I wondered aloud. Sarah put the car in park. "Let's find out." Against my better judgment, I followed Sarah as she crossed the street and walked around the side of the house, staying out of sight behind the tall hedge I'd planted years ago. From our vantage point, we could see Ryan kneeling beside a small garden stone at the back of the property, placing the flowers carefully beside it. I couldn't read the inscription from this distance, but I didn't need to. I knew what it was, a memorial to me. "Oh," I breathed, my heart constricting. Ryan remained kneeling for several minutes, his lips moving as if speaking to the stone. Then he stood, wiped his eyes, and walked back to his car. We waited until he'd driven away before approaching the stone. "Nancy Jones," it read. "Mother, mentor, hidden strength, 1956-2024. Below the inscription was a small engraved rose, identical to the pendant in my purse. "He comes here every week," said a voice behind us, making us both jump. The new homeowner, a young woman with a toddler on her hip, was watching us from the back porch. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "We didn't mean to intrude." "It's okay," she said, smiling kindly. "Are you friends of Nancy's?" "Yes," Sarah answered when I couldn't. "Old friends from California." The young woman nodded. When we bought the house, Ryan asked if he could place a small memorial stone for his mother in the garden. She loved those roses, apparently. "He visits every week, rain or shine." That's lovely," I managed. "Did you know her well?" the woman asked. I looked at the stone, at the roses blooming all around it, at the home I'd built and loved for so many years. "Yes," I said softly. "I knew her very well." As we drove to the airport, I remained silent, processing what I'd seen. Ryan, grieving at a memorial stone in what had once been my garden. The pendant, somehow finding its way to me. The scholarship in my name, supporting women like me. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked as we boarded our flight. "I think so," I said, surprising myself with the realization that it was true. I think I needed to see that, to know that he truly understands what was lost. Back in California, life resumed its pleasant rhythm. I continued my watercolor classes, now showing promising talent. Sarah expanded her garden consultancy business. Together we explored our new home state, taking weekend trips to wine country, to Big Sur, to the redwood forests. 6 months after our visit to the scholarship launch, William Davis called with unexpected news. "Mrs. Miller, I wanted to inform you that Ryan Jones has purchased a property in your area, a lake house on Clear Lake, about an hour from Monterey." My breath caught. "Why?" "He didn't share his reasons with me," William said carefully, "but he did ask if I knew any particularly scenic areas near Monterey. I mentioned Clear Lake, among others." "Did you tell him I was here?" I asked sharply. "Of course not," William assured me. "Our agreement stands. As far as Ryan knows, Nancy Jones is deceased, and Nancy Miller is a stranger." After hanging up, I shared the news with Sarah. "It's probably just coincidence," she suggested. "Clear Lake is beautiful. Lots of people buy vacation homes there." "Probably," I agreed, though a nagging doubt remained. Life continued. My second year in California passed peacefully, marked by new friendships, new hobbies, and increasingly better health. Dr. Patel, my oncologist at Stanford, had declared me cancer-free at my 1-year checkup, though I would continue monitoring for the next 5 years. On the anniversary of my death, Sarah and I threw ourselves a party, a celebration of life, of rebirth, of second chances. We invited the friends we'd made in Monterey, bought expensive champagne, and toasted to the women we'd become. "To Nancy Jones," Sarah toasted, raising her glass. "Who died so Nancy Miller could live." "To Nancy Jones," I agreed. "Who loved so much she forgot to love herself." We drank to the woman who'd worked herself to exhaustion for an ungrateful son, who'd saved every penny for his future, who'd made herself invisible so he could shine. We mourned her briefly, but sincerely. Then we drank to the woman who'd risen from her ashes, wealthy, independent, free to discover who she was when she wasn't defined by someone else's needs. We celebrated her with the joy of people who'd waited 68 years to meet their true selves. That night, I dreamed about Ryan for the first time in months. In the dream, he was standing on a dock beside a lake, looking out at the water. He turned as if sensing my presence, but his eyes looked through me rather than at me. "Mom?" he called, searching the empty air. "Is that you?" I woke with tears on my cheeks, unsure whether they were from sadness or relief. The next morning, a delivery arrived at our condo, a large bouquet of roses, every shade from pale pink to deep crimson. "Secret admirer?" Sarah teased, examining the card. "To Nancy Miller," I read aloud. "Happy anniversary. The lake house is yours whenever you want it. The key is with the roses." Sure enough, nestled among the blooms was a small golden key. "No signature," Sarah noted, taking the card from my trembling fingers. "It has to be from Ryan," I said. "But how could he know? How could he possibly know?" Sarah examined the roses thoughtfully. "Maybe he doesn't know exactly. Maybe he just hopes." I fingered the key, feeling its weight in my palm. "What do I do?" "What do you want to do?" Sarah countered. I considered the question carefully. 2 years ago, I'd chosen to disappear, to become someone new, to leave behind the pain of rejection and the lifetime of sacrifice. I'd built a good life as Nancy Miller, a life with purpose, joy, and dignity. But Nancy Jones had built something too, not just a fortune, but a son who, despite his grievous errors, had found his way to understanding what truly mattered. A son who visited a memorial stone every week, who established a scholarship in her name, who somehow, impossibly, seemed to sense her presence even now. "I think," I said slowly, I'd like to see this lake house. The next weekend, Sarah and I drove to Clear Lake. The address, included with the flowers, led us to a beautiful cabin overlooking the water, surrounded by pine trees and wild roses. "It's perfect," I breathed as we pulled into the driveway. The key fit smoothly in the lock. Inside, the cabin was simply but beautifully furnished. Comfortable chairs facing the lake view, bookshelves filled with titles I would have chosen myself, a kitchen stocked with my favorite teas. On the mantel was a framed photograph, the same one displayed at the scholarship launch, of me and Ryan at his college graduation. Beside it was a handwritten note. "If you're reading this, my impossible hope was right. The lake house is yours, Mom. No strings, no expectations, no pressure to explain or forgive. Just a place where you can be at peace, whoever you are now. Love, Ryan." "He knows," I whispered, tears filling my eyes. "Somehow he knows." Sarah squeezed my shoulder. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I looked out at the lake, at the peaceful water reflecting the sky, at the new life Ryan had offered me. Not as his mother, not as the woman who sacrificed everything for him, but as whoever I chose to be now. "I think," I said slowly, "I'm going to paint this view." And so I did, sitting on the deck of my lake house, capturing the light on the water, the colors of the wild roses, the vast openness of the sky. I painted as Nancy Miller, the woman who had learned to value herself, who had found joy in creation rather than sacrifice. But I signed the painting with a small stylized NJ, an acknowledgement of the woman who had made this moment possible, the woman whose journey had led me here. I never saw Ryan at the lake house, though sometimes I found evidence of his presence. A book moved, fresh flowers in a vase, the pantry restocked with my favorite teas. We maintained our separate lives, our separate identities, connected by an understanding too complex for words. 1 year later, I received a wedding invitation, not from Ryan, but from Olivia White, who had apparently moved on. The event was featured in the society pages, with no mention of Ryan among the guests. William Davis, who remained my link to my old life, reported that Ryan had been promoted to chief ethics officer at a prestigious financial firm in San Francisco, a position created specifically for him after his role in exposing Harold White's improprieties. "He's doing well," William assured me during one of our occasional phone calls. "Building a life of integrity, by all accounts." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. 5 years after my death, with my cancer firmly in remission, Sarah and I expanded our horizons further, planning a trip around the world, the adventure we'd originally intended when we first contemplated leaving our old lives behind. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked as we finalized our itinerary. "More than ready," I assured her. "It's time to see what else the world has to offer." The night before our departure, I visited the lake house one last time, leaving a note of my own. "Thank you for this peaceful place, this gift with no strings attached. I've found joy here and healing. I hope you found the same in your life. The woman who was once your mother is at peace. The woman she became is happy. Perhaps that's all any of us can hope for, to find peace with our past and joy in our present. Take care of yourself, Ryan. Know that somewhere in the world, someone is proud of the man you've become. NM, and sometimes still NJ. As I placed the note on the mantel beside the photograph, I felt a sense of completion. Not forgiveness, exactly. Some wounds run too deep for simple forgiveness. But acceptance. Acceptance of the past that had shaped us both, of the separate paths we'd chosen, of the quiet understanding that had grown between us. Looking out at the lake one last time, I saw not just my reflection in the water, but the reflection of a life fully lived. with all its pain and joy, sacrifice and self-discovery, loss and renewal. The woman who died at Ryan's wedding, the woman who'd spent her life being diminished and dismissed, was truly gone forever. In her place was someone who'd learned that it's never too late to start over, never too old to discover your own worth, never too frightening to choose yourself over people who don't choose you. Ryan thought his mother was dead, and in a way he was right. The mother he'd taken for granted, used up and thrown away, was gone, but the woman she'd always been underneath, strong, smart, capable of building something beautiful, was finally, gloriously, completely alive. And she was never going back. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. If you enjoyed this story, check out The Will She Left Behind and When My Daughter-in-Law Banned Me from Seeing My Grandchildren, two other stories that are channel favorites.